Welcome back to part three with David Alter from Planning Alliance.
You mentioned you brought up like transferring your businesses to your kids and stuff. Do you have to do that if your businesses are set up under a trust?
Well, if your businesses are, so everything's fact specific, all right? So if your business is owned by a trust, the question is, what are the terms of that trust, right? Um, and the question is, so if your business is owned by a trust, and you look young to me, but everyone looks young to me, so it's nothing personal. I wish I looked young to everybody else. The If the trust was set up by your parents, your that trust is going to have a lot of provisions in it. And we find often, I say often, 99% of the time often, that next generation of beneficiaries doesn't quite know what's in those trusts. And there's can be a lot of things to look at in the trust. And I'll give you just an example of one that we're dealing on, very prominent family that the people in this room, you would know them, but all these trusts were set up over the years, over the decades. None of them have exactly the same trustee arrangements. It's a problem. There's people who are trustees are not involved with the family or the business. We have to straighten all of this out. I'm using that just as an example. So the trust is an owner. The trust is an owner, but you may be running the business. But you may find the beneficiaries of the trust might be siblings, commonly, and they're not running the business. And the point of contention that's going to be there is that fair to you? How do you make that fair to the children that are building the equity and the value in the business? How do you make that fair and not cross the parents who wanted all their children treated equally? And there's definitely solutions to that, right? Just a quick solution to that circumstance would be to make sure your employment contract is set up properly so that you get rewarded for the equity you create for everybody. That would be an example. Coming back to the real estate business, we found, the father, one of the founding patriarchs, said to the son, well, if I'm not here, you're running everything. But, they've got, real estate, you got partners all over the place, and you're doing all the work, but they're all sharing equally in everything. And it was a point of contention. It's like, I don't want this. Why would I do this? I do all the work, but they're all making the same profits. So you want to deal with how the people who run the business get compensated for it. And also, if you have very successful children in the business, how they get their sweat equity, how they get that. I'm not going to answer that now. I'm just raising some of the issues that we see.
I'm kind of asking the question. I'm 24, so yeah, relatively
Right.
young, I suppose. But I'm trying to ask it because I'm in the middle of due diligence on my first multifamily complex.
Right.
I have all intention to expand that exponentially, and I would like to set up my family trust correctly from the beginning so I don't end up in a giant mess that needs to get solved when I'm old with dementia and the kids don't really know what I want and I can't legally answer questions anymore.
Right.
So I'm trying to make it as easy as I can to start so I don't have to mess around later.
Okay. So the thing is, the question is what's smart to do at the front end? Okay. What I feel is most important at the front end is not the trusts and ownerships and things like that. I feel that what's most important is what happens to your business interest if you can't show up or make your own decisions. So we got to decide what we're dealing with. And things like estate taxes, sometimes it's the tail wagging the dog. And I'll tell you why. At 24 years old, your life expectancy, meaning there's a 50% chance that you'll live longer than that, is probably close to 60 years. It's close to 60 years. Okay. Now, the the and to the extent that you don't do something and we didn't make it to 60 years. We didn't make it to 12 months. I mean, you can cover that with life insurance for like peanuts. So that to me is the tail wagging the dog. The bigger issue is if you can't come to work, right? Now you've got debts, you've got a construction project, you've got vendors, etc. Who's signing the contracts? Who's managing this? I think my own feeling is I'm not saying that the estate planning is not important. It is, right? But I think the actual practical business aspects of things are more important, right? And then, from an estate planning standpoint, you're doing this project unless you're starting out wealthy. You don't want to start by divorcing yourself from access to your wealth, right? There can be very sophisticated things to do there. I'm not the expert on all of them. We have some of those experts in our firm, but I would focus on I would start by understanding where my priorities are, my overall factual situation, what risks I'm taking, because if you're building a real estate project and you're borrowing money and you're at the front end of this, you're probably also putting a personal signature on debt, a guarantee, recourse. All right. How do I protect myself? How do I protect myself in that situation? What can I do if things go south? And things do go south. The older the party is on this group chat, the more things they've seen gone south. I mean, I could give you so many examples, unfortunately, because right now we're seeing everything that goes like this, we think. My own personal opinion is that's a form of inflation. It's just on the assets, all right, as opposed to on the cost of everything, right? But it's a form of inflation. But I've probably seen over my business career 5 bone-crunching recessions where recourse debt took down people who thought they were very wealthy. Seen it. So what happens? And that's the kind of thinking. I can't answer that now because we do follow a specific process. We want to start with first, if we're going to work with someone, just agreeing on the scope of what we're trying to do together, right? How we get paid, how our working relationship is, etc. Then we do extensive fact finding. Then we come back with a preliminary assessment. I don't want to spend too much time on what's involved in that. And then we come back with, in effect, a term sheet that deals with all the issues that we've addressed, just written in plain English instead of in some big document that's hard to go through. And then we babysit it and follow through to make sure it actually gets implemented. So I don't want to get too specific and depart from that. We would need to do the fact finding up front and then to see what it tells us.
Okay, so focus on a bit more immediate who makes decisions if I can't show up,
That is
opposed
correct.
to the far off what happens when I die.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
because at 24 years old, oftentimes, not always, oftentimes the insuring for death is like peanuts, all right, relatively to the scheme of things. And it might even be that your bank demanded collateral of some kind in the form of insurance. But what gets overlooked on that collateral, which we do, is if you become disabled, who's paying that bank loan? It's insurable, often, not always, but often, that a disability can make your bank loan payments for you.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Then one more question. You were talking
Sure.
about how businesses are evaluated.
Right.
Hopefully a bit easier question. Does subscription type income significantly increase business valuation?
What do you mean by subscription income?
Like everything is subscription based now. Like you can order meat delivered to your house based on subscription.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay.
is that stuff like
Yeah.
everything comes with a monthly fee to have such and such
Yes. The more,
benefit?
right. So if you're going to evaluate what something's worth, if all my sales are one-off versus they're recurring, the ones that are recurring are worth more than the one-offs. All right. There's no question. Now, when we address valuation, um, we don't do business valuations. What we do is we address valuation in the context of a business agreement. Because the kind of real estate lends itself to an appraisal as a general rule in a business agreement. I want out. If I want out, you've got to buy me out over, 10 years or something or 20 years, whatever it is, because it's real estate. It's not liquid. I want to get out. And that lends itself to an appraisal process. But in most businesses, we don't want an appraisal process as part of an agreement because it means you never know what your liability is until somebody shows up and tells you. So the real issue will become if, let's say, you and Corey are partners in the subscription-based business, and Corey says, I want out, or Corey became totally disabled and couldn't work, or Corey passed away, or you wanted to force him out, or things like that. The question is, how are you going to decide at the time what he gets paid and what he's willing to accept at the time? That's what we're looking to put in an agreement. How are we going to make the decision? Right? I'll tell you what doesn't work and what we see all the time, and it never works. And I'll give you, again, a real life example when it hasn't worked is certificates of agreed value. We'll agree once every year, once every 3 years, we'll meet, we'll set the value. We see this all the time. It's drawn up all the time in agreements. The problem is business owners never get around to completing that certificate of agreement. It's never done. I've seen several hundred of them. It's never been done once. We had a check cashing company. There was a group of the two owners owned a group of check cashing businesses. They owned them a long time. The one of the owners in her 70s had long silver hair, a ponytail, and carried a revolver. This is who I'm dealing with. These are nice people, but she had a revolver. All right. She went to work with it in New York City. Her partner for the past 30, 40 years developed cancer, and he looked at their buy-sell agreement, and they had agreed on the valuation on the business 30 or 40 years ago. And he asked her to update it, and she said no. That's our agreement. That's a real example, right? So usually what we want to see, and it can vary depending on the nature of the business. Usually we want to see a function of trued up profits, not, the tax return profits, but how they get trued up. All right, trued up for making the executive compensation fair market value, trued up for perks and things like this by the CPA. We true it up and some multiple of earnings. But the second thing is, and this gets overlooked in every single time, that we want as part of every business agreement is book value. Why? Because if book value is not part of that agreement, then I have no incentive to leave my capital in this business when I think I'm getting out. I want everything out of that business. I will not leave a dollar in. I will not put a penny in if book value is not addressed, that I can't get my capital out of the business. And we want the owners of the business to have their interest aligned with that business up until the day they step out, up until the last day. If capital is required in the business, we want them leaving it in there, not saying they have to get it out because it won't enhance their valuation. So very often we'll go to multiple of trued up earnings. We always include book value. Some businesses, by their nature, could be revenue. It's an industry standard. Some could be gross profit margin. And then if we want to put in puts and calls, and we do a lot because we want people to have liquidity, the put may be at one multiple and the call may be at a higher multiple. Because if I want to force the business to buy me, maybe it's 4 times earnings. But if you want to force me out, maybe you have to pay me 6 times earnings because you decided to force me out. You follow? So, it's not, you don't have to think of these things in advance. If we start with a detailed process, starting with the fact finding first, knowing what the objectives are, then we can try out different things for size. By going through a process, it takes all the stress out of getting this done. And it also increases the likelihood or can give all the parties a confidence that they will end up with a finished product that they want. If we just go step by step, as opposed to jumping too quickly.
So, David, you
Yes.
mentioned quite a few things of issues that go wrong in partnership agreements
Right.
and that things that you've seen. So, um, when working through that operating agreement, partnership structures or governance, what are the most mistakes that you see from young entrepreneurs, young business owners getting started?
Failure to have a workable agreement. That's the biggest. So, I find in the closely held market, probably 95% of the businesses don't even have a workable agreement. And if you ask them why, my questions might go, they'll tell me they've got I come in, do you have an agreement? Oh, yeah, yeah, they got it in the drawer. I said, the agreement's a nice thick agreement. Yep. Cost you a lot of money to get it done. Yep. Said, you ever sign the agreement? Nope. What about insurance? Oh, yeah, we got all these proposals. We had like three different agents competing for the insurance. They were all going back and forth. I said, you ever buy any insurance? Nope. That's the most common situation. That's in about half the businesses did all this planning and paid for it and didn't execute. About half of them haven't done anything. They mean to get to it. They know they're going to do it. And about 5% have done it to various degrees. Okay. So I'd say that's number one. Number two, and to me, this is a big one, is the question that we want to ask. Well, first I'll make a statement. You get paid two ways for coming for work. You get paid with your current income, whether it's a W-2, a 1099, a K-1, an under the table, an over the table, whatever you're taking out of that business, that's your current income. And you get paid with the growth and value of your business, right? Those are two ways you get paid. How do you get the growth and value out of your business? The most common mistake that I see is that's not addressed. Or if it's addressed, they have a death by sell agreement. If you die, you get bought out. So I then understand that the way I get my value out of my business is by dying. That is a great technique. Okay. It's like, well, who thought of this? Probably somebody in my business because we sell insurance, but it makes absolutely no sense to have a death only buy sell agreement. And the other thing is, our position is that a buy sell agreement does not require insurance. And we sell insurance. I want to be clear. All right. Esther didn't tell you we've about a recurring premium in our firm right now, about $150 million a year, coming to subscription businesses. Ours is a
Wow.
subscription business. That's all recurring revenue, right? The the but the question is it should not require insurance. When you're dealing with business owners are smart, or they're not in business anymore. You can't survive in business by just being an idiot and be lucky. You'll hear people, oh, they were lucky. They're not lucky. All right? They're shrewd. All right? And so your buy sell agreement should work without insurance. And then insurance becomes an optional business decision that you look at and you say, does this make sense? Is what's being shown to me on the table make sense? Because I'm an intelligent business person. I can decide if I want to put premiums in that direction. Right. And I'm in the business of selling insurance. I'm not taking any away, but we design buy sell agreements that do not rely on insurance. Okay.
Got it.
It's an option. It's a business decision that you make. So I'd say the other big mistake is how do you get your value out of the business, not addressing it in this business agreement, and in effect leaving you in a trap. You're like in a room that's got no door and no windows.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing I might say is people who let their spouses sign bank loans. The bank will
Wow.
give you, oh, your spouse will sign you. They put it on. I don't know where you came from, banker. My spouse isn't signing that
For businesses.
for businesses. I see it all the
Wow.
time. Just I mean, are you like, you kidding me? Here's one. And I'll tell you why these insurance companies do this. We had a paving company. The sons came in, and we were brought in because the sons wanted to buy that out. That's how we got introduced. And the sons, they each own 10% of the company, but they got the company in a few years. They increased its size 16-fold. These are strong kids. So not every kid in business is strong. We have to understand that. But sometimes they are, right? These kids were very strong and they're immensely successful today. But what we found is doing our fact finding that not only did they were 10% owners each, but they had jointly and severally guaranteed the performance bond with dad and mom. And dad and mom had pledged their house as collateral. The boys had pledged their homes as collateral. and the boys' wives signed as personal guarantors as well. And I feel that you need to draw the line. The reason the insurance company, the bonding company does this is they want to make sure that, I'm surprised they didn't ask the children to sign it, the babies. Okay. They want to make sure that the last person on the planet that is not getting paid is them. That you'll be dead before they don't get paid. That's how the lending world works. And that's how it works. There's no such thing as a benevolent or friendly lender. The only friendly lender is your parent. And even then, it's not that friendly. All right. It's
Yep.
so, who signs? Who get, look, you guys, a lot of you in the real estate business, you like getting personal guarantees on leases.
Yeah.
But most of the time, people are willing to lease space without personal guarantees if pushed. I'm just telling you out of personal experience. It's you want to push back on the risks that you're taking in business. And once you've got it pushed as far as you can, then you've got a business decision to make. Am I prepared to accept the risk that I'm taking? I'm consciously taking that risk because you can't be in business without taking risk. It's there. And this is why when other people want to take what you've earned to subsidize effectively other people who haven't taken the risk that you've done, you resent it because you know the price that you paid for success. It doesn't just walk in the door.
Yeah, that's great advice, great thought process. I'm sure you've seen, I mean, hearing the stories that you're talking about, you've seen so much. Going back to incentives and aligning incentives with business partners, just one more
Right.
thing before we
Yeah.
move on. I know we're chewing up a lot of your time and we got other presenters to get to, but just real quick, um, for real estate entrepreneurs thinking about aligning incentives between partners, operators, and investors on paper so the business survives multiple market cycles, how would you suggest that they form their agreement where they're in alignment on those
Okay.
incentives?
All right. Um, so first of all, every business deal is unique, and people and the various real estate operators and investors, oftentimes they're sophisticated. I'll tell you what I don't like. I may lose people on this call when I tell you what I don't like. I don't like I don't like predictions as to how well things are going to do in the future. Okay. I mean, everybody, you get investors and you got to produce this whole spreadsheet and it shows you all the cash flow that's going to come out and things like that. Um, my rule of thumb is that everything takes twice as long as planned and costs twice as much as planned. So whatever planning that you're doing, you want to assume from that plan that things cost twice as much as you're planning and take twice as long. And in real estate, the twice as long might be four times as long. Okay. And I think when you're talking to your investors, you want to be realistic with them about the risks. Being realistic with people about risk does not mean you put a bunch of fine point in this investment has risk. I think that you want to go over what's wrong with the deal with them. I think that you want honesty between the parties. And let me tell you, I want to do this deal. This is why I think it's good, but I want to tell you what I see as the risks in my shoes, right? The second thing is, and in doing that now, let's talk about how all this is going to work if things go badly and if things go well. What are we going to do? What's our resiliency as a group here if things go poorly? What's our strength? Because the people who can survive the downturn are the ones that end up very wealthy. And I had a group. This wasn't real estate, but I'll make my point. You'll see my point here about it. It'll answer your question. But it wasn't a real estate business. It was we were brought in to advise these two guys. They were going to open their first restaurant bar. They later, one of them later became very successful, sought after in the restaurant business. And they came to me and they wanted to know how to deal with their investors. So I'm a little, what's our word? OCD. I said, well, before we do that, let's do a budget for your firm. So we did the budget, and I said, listen, I go, you don't have to worry about your investors. You're going to run out of money before you ever get started. I said, because things take twice as long and it costs twice as much. I said, you need to raise more money. So they found an angel investor, some kind out of Chicago, who's going to put in another few $100,000, but he demanded they reduce their salaries in exchange, and they agreed. And I told them, you are not agreeing to that. And I called their investor and I go, they are not reducing their salaries. I go, that is unfair. And they're not doing it. And he agreed. He put the money in without them reducing their salaries. That whole project, because they raised enough money, turned out to be a home run and then led to them to have three other one restaurants. One of them is a landmark in the New York area. It's a landmark restaurant that they were brought in because of their track record. So I think what we want to do is be honest. You've got executives who are getting paid for coming to work. Getting paid for coming to work is not the same as their incentive compensation piece for the job succeeding. Because if your job takes 3 years to get started instead of 1 year, they still have to feed their families because they're running the job. They're not working any less. So the question is, what is their base component to their compensation? And what is their incentive component to their compensation? Because we want them aligned with the owners, with the investors, right? And then, in between the investors and these executives, you might have what I call the syndicators. And the syndicators may have some of their own capital in on the same page as the investors, but they're also looking for a success interest in the business. And we want to define what that is because, I think they use in real estate the expression preferred your return. If you get your preferred return, then I'm entitled to this excess or to a percentage of the excess. And those amounts are negotiable. But put everything on the table. This is how it's going to work if things don't go well. This is how it's going to work if things go well. And let's do a scenario that's on the conservative side of realistic and see how it looks. Now, here's my comment about forecasting there. If you're overly conservative, you'll make bad decisions. You're over if you're conservative enough, nothing looks good, right? So you want to
Yep.
be on the conservative side, but on the realistic side, because the other thing I might say, two other things, I didn't bring them up. Number one, I start off with, if everything goes well, what are we looking at here? This is what we're trying to do, right? And and start from there, and then take a look at my other scenarios. How does it pan out? Um, the other thing is, I think we get to details too quickly in business negotiations. The big picture has to make sense before we start worrying about details, right? So let's see, investors, let's see if we're on the same page. If everything goes according to plan, a realistic plan, not an insane plan, if everything goes according to plan, where are we? Does it make sense? Because if it doesn't make sense, if everything goes according to plan, we don't have to worry about what happens if it doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So just a kind of an order to the thought process, kind of like corralling the horses in here to get to a point. My experience is that a agreement gets reached by narrowing the differences, by coming down to the two or three or 12, whatever it is, sticking points. And then, okay, without these sticking points here, now people got to make decisions. I've got a line I can't cross. You're going to have to decide if you can do it. When we're talking intra-partner negotiations on existing businesses, we bring some additional tools to the table. I think we bring the baseball bat, the cattle prod, the car battery with the jumper cables. We have to bring tools because sometimes, people dig in their heels and you got to kind of smack them. It's like, guys,
Got to
there's no,
incentivize them.
yeah, you got to, and second, there's no such thing as a perfect agreement. So you've got to decide what level of risk you can live with. I might tell you my secret as a tenant, how I deal with the landlord. You might find it might work in reverse. All right. what, but it might, it's what I do with because everyone says, I go, I'm going to lease a space. They want a 10-year lease. Okay, I'm going to lease a 10-year space from you. That's a big agreement for me. They give me, it's called the short form lease. It's this thick. This is the short form lease.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. What I do is I tell my lawyer, I go, I want you to read this and clean it up for me. He does that. Then I redline his copy. I don't redline the landlord's copy because, I mean, I'm not gonna what I've been given to sign. I'm not gonna sign. So I'm not trying to make myself a difficult tenant here. But the point is sometimes you got to make it easier to get things done, right? So if I could get something cleaned up first before I'm analyzing it is better than if I'm analyzing it before it's cleaned up. I just
Putting it in plain language. Yeah.
yeah. You want everything in plain. You want. Oh, that's the other thing I do, whether it's a lease or any business contract. If I can't understand it, I just cross it out. I'm done with that. Don't sign anything that you don't understand, right? So the
Yeah,
bank gives you
that's
something, you agree that you're waiving your rights under such and such act and this and that and that and this. I just cross it out. I don't know what that means. Well, your lawyer will tell you what that means. Well, I tell them I'm my own lawyer. I don't know what it means. So, I'm not signing that. But that referring to some statute, well, then give me a copy of the statute so I can read it. I don't, I think particularly with lending agreements, purchase agreements, things like this, read them, read them.
yeah, of
And
course.
I would not
Don't ever sign
rely
anything
on
without reading it.
I would not rely on AI to read these things for you, right? And lawyers, my thing with lawyers, and again, I'm not a real estate investor. I have family members that are. That was not my thing for various reasons. I do have a lot of investment in my operating business, among other things. But the what I don't lose my train of thought here. With lawyers, they don't always think the way I think, and again, come back to real estate with leases. Lawyers, oh, they got 32 pages of what they're going to put in that you can put in your operating escalators. Can I tell you something? That's absolutely irrelevant to me. You can put anything that you want in your escalators for operating expenses, as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're consistent with it year to year. What do I care what you put in there? If you
Yeah.
want to cover, your lawyer's fees, that's fine with me. As long as you covered them the prior year, what do I care? See, the
Yep.
issue is not what 35 or 200 things you can't put in there. And the second thing is, am I ever going to read or audit? Oh yeah, I've given like a week to read your books and audit them. I mean, you kidding me? No one's probably ever done that in the history of real estate, audited their operating cost escalator. What do I care? As long as it's consistent year to year, that's all. So I'm just using that as an example for looking at agreements.
Awesome. Great advice. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Appreciate your time, David.
I appreciate you
It's
all
been a
taking the time
pleasure
to
talking
listen.
to you and hearing some of the great examples and your guidance on how to do this right.
All right. We're all good?
All good. Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate your
Thank you. It's
time.
nice to meet
Thank you
everyone.
for joining us on this three-part series with David Alter from Planning Alliance. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Let us know what you liked, what applied to you, and what you want to hear more of.